Hi everyone, you're welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Amaka. In this tutorial, we are going to be learning how to make a cupped corset with Queen Anne neckline. If you're yet to subscribe to this channel, please click on the subscribe button and also turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified whenever I upload new videos. So let's get started. Now I've drawn some lines already. I'm going to briefly explain what I did here. Now this is my shoulder point, bust point, under bust point, waist point, and the full length of the top and my hemming allowance. The neck width I'm working with is 3 inches and the neck depth is also 3 inches. So I'm not going to use this neckline. It's only going to serve as a guide. I'm using Queen Anne neckline. So half of my shoulder measurement is 7.5 inches plus half inch seam allowance. That gives you 8 inches. So I'm going to mark 8 inches here. Now from this 8 inches point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch and for my shoulder slant, and I'll connect it to the neckline. Now from this point, from this shoulder slant, I'm going to impute my armhole depth. Half of my armhole measurement is 8 inches. So I'm going to mark 8 inches here. Now, another way to do this is by dividing your bust circumference by 6, and whatever it gives you, you add 1.5 inches to it. Whatever it gives you, that's your armhole depth. But I'm working with half of my armhole measurement. So I'm going to connect this point to this point. Now, before I do that, I'm going to measure what I have here, and I'll bring it down here. And I'll connect this point to this point, just like this. And I'll extend the chest point. So the next thing I'll do is to find the midpoint of this line. And from that midpoint, I'll go in by ½ inch. On the chest point, I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and that gives you 9.5 inches. And I'll connect it to this point, from this point to this point. Now to impute my dart, I'm going to be working with my nipple to nipple measurement. Now half of my nipple to nipple measurement is 4 inches. So I'm going to mark 4 inches here, and I'll mark 4 inches here. And I'll connect the points. Now on the hemline, I'm going to mark 1 inch on both sides of this line. I'll mark 1 inch here and 1 inch here. Now I'm going to label these lines. Now this is my chest point, my bust point, my under bust point, my waist point, and the full length of the top. Now on the waist point, I'm going to mark 1 inch on both sides of this line. I'll mark 1 inch here and I'll mark 1 inch here. On the under bust point, I'm going to mark 1 inch here and 1 inch here, and I'll connect the points. So after that, I'm going to connect this point to this point and this point to this point. So the next thing I'm going to do is to find the midpoint of the shoulder line, and I'll connect it to the bust point. So this is the midpoint, and I'll connect it to the bust point, just like this. So after that, I'm going to extend this line, the chest point. I'll extend the line. So this is my chest point. Now on this line, I'm going to mark ½ inch. And I'm also going to mark this same ½ inch on the under bust point, just like this. And I'll connect the points, just like this. Now to create my cup, I'm going to connect this point to this point. Now here, I'm going to find the midpoint of this line. So this is the midpoint. I'm going to connect it to the under bust point. So the next thing I'm going to do is to go up by 1.5 inches from the chest point. Now this is optional. You can decide to go up by 1 inch, 1.5 inches, 2 inches, depending on how you want your corset to be. So I'm extending the points and I'll connect it with a straight horizontal line. So now I'm going to impute my dart. Now I'm going to mark 1 inch on both sides of this line. Now this 1 inch I have here, that is this 1 inch I marked here, I'm going to mark the same thing here. 1 inch here and 1 inch here. And I'll connect the points to the bust points. Just like this. So I'm going to connect this point to this point and this point to the armhole. I'll blend this part back into the armhole. So the next thing I'm going to do is to return these 2 inches dart to the chest point. Now if you don't return this dart, you're going to have shortage. So I'm going to return these 2 inches dart here. Now I'm going to take my horizontal measurement. Now on the chest point, I'm going to take my bust measurement divided by 4, and that gives you 9.5 inches. On the under bust point, I'm going to take my under bust measurement divided by 4, and that gives you 7.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 7.5 inches here, plus this 2 inches dart that I'm going to cut off. I'm returning it here. Now on the waist point, I'm going to take my waist measurement on the waist point. Now my actual waist measurement is 32 inches. But because I want to snatch 2 inches out of my waist, that means I'm going to minus 2 inches from my waist measurement. So my waist circumference is 32 inches, 32 minus 2 inches, that gives you 30 inches. So 30 divided by 4 gives you 7.5 inches. I'm going to mark 7.5 inches on the waist point. So this is 7.5 inches plus these 2 inches that I'm going to return it. Now on the hem, I'm going to take my hip measurement on the hem. Now my hip circumference divided by 4 gives you 10.5 inches plus these 2 inches that I'm going to cut off from here. I'm going to return it. And I'll connect the points. After that, I'm going to add my seam allowance. The seam allowance I'm working with is 1.5 inches. And I'll connect the points. Now on this point, I'm going to go up by 1.5 inches. And I'll connect this point to this point to avoid pointy edges. So for our pin and neckline, I'm going to connect this point to this point. Just like this. So on this point, I'm going to go up by 0.25, that is 1/4 inch. So I'll mark 1/4 inch here and I'll connect it to this point. Now this is to avoid gaping. So that's just it with this. That's just it with the front panel. Now I'm going to cut it. But before that, I'm going to add my shoulder seam allowance. Then I'll cut it. So this is my dart. I'm cutting off this part because it's not going to be useful to me. Now I'm going to label these cups. I'll label this one and these two. This is the center front and side front. I'll label here as the lower part and here as the upper part. Now this is for me not to mix it up. And I'll cut it. So this is the front panel. Now when cutting, you're going to cut two of these, two of this, two of this, two of this, and one of this. Now this will be cut on fold. For the back panel, now this is my starting point, which is also going to serve as the shoulder line. This is my waist point, and this is the full length of the top. I'm going to start by taking my neck measurement. My neck width is 3 inches and my neck depth is 1 inch. And I'm going to take my shoulder measurement. Now half of my shoulder measurement is 7.5 inches plus half inch seam allowance. That gives you 8 inches. And I'll connect the points. Now from this shoulder point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant and I'll connect it to the neckline. Now from this point, I'm going to impute my armhole depth. My armhole depth is 8 inches, so I'm going to mark 8 inches here. So this 8 inches I have on the shoulder, I'm going to mark it here. And I'll connect this point to this point. Now I'll extend this point to this point and this point to this point. So I'm going to find the midpoint of this line. Now this is the midpoint of this line. Now let me label these lines. This is my chest point, waist point, and the full length of the top. So on the chest point, I'm going to take my bust measurement. My bust circumference divided by 4 gives you 9.5 inches. And I'll connect this point to this point, just like this. Now take note, my back panel doesn't have zipper allowance. I'm going to lace it. So to impute my dart, to be working with my nipple to nipple measurement. Half of my nipple to nipple measurement is 4 inches. So I'll mark 4 inches here. And I'll mark 4 inches here. And I'll mark 4 inches here. And I'll connect the points. Now to impute my dart, I'm going to mark ½ inch on both sides of this line. I'll mark ½ inch here. And I'll mark ½ inch here. I'll also mark ½ inch here. And I'll mark ½ inch here. While from the chest point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch and I'll mark 1 inch. And I'll connect the points. So the next thing I'm going to do is to take my horizontal measurement. On the chest point, I've already taken my bust circumference divided by 4, which is 9.5 inches. I'm going to take my waist measurement on the waist point. My waist circumference divided by 4 gives you 7.5 inches. So I'll mark 7.5 inches here. Plus this 1 inch for that. I'm going to return it here. On the hem of the top, I'm going to take my hip measurement, hip circumference divided by 4. That gives you 10.5 inches. Plus this 1 inch for that. I'm going to return it here. And I'll connect the points. So I'm going to add my seam allowance. Now the seam allowance I'm working with is 1.5 inches. I'll connect the points. Now to avoid pointy edges, from here I'm going to go up by 1.5 inches, just like I did in the front panel, and I'll connect it to this point. Now this corset is going to have lacing. So on this point, I'm going to mark 2 inches because I'm going to cut off 2 inches from there, and I'm going to cut off 1 inch from here, and I'll connect the points. So for the Queen Anne neckline, from this point, I'm going to go in by 3 inches and I'll mark. And I'll connect it to the neckline. So to avoid gaping, I'm going to go up by 1/4 inch from here and I'll connect it to this point. I'm going to cut that part off. So I'll add my shoulder seam allowance and I'll cut it. I'm going to cut off this part, and I'm also going to cut off this part. I'll cut off this part as well. I'm still going to label it. Now this is the upper part, this is center back, this is side back, this is the lower part, lower part. This part I used to write that just for me to know where to place the one I'm going to place, so I don't mix it up. So this is the back panel. Now this is the front, this is the front panel, and this is the back panel. If you found this tutorial helpful, please click on the like button, share this video with your friends, share this video in your sewing groups, subscribe to my channel if you've not done so. Feel free to ask questions. I'll be in the comment section to answer all your questions. We've come to the end of this tutorial. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.